If you've ever found a deal and asked yourself, should I flip this or just hold it and rent it out? You're not alone in that. It's one of the most common questions I hear personally from people who are either just getting started or trying to figure out how to grow faster. And the honest answer is, it really depends. But today I want to break down exactly what it depends on, because there's a real framework for thinking through this decision, and it's not as complicated as people make it out to be. All right, so let's start with flipping, because it's what most people think of first. A flip is when you buy a property, renovate it, and sell it for a profit, usually within a few months to a year. The appeal is obvious. You get a big check at the end. You're not a landlord. There's no property management, no tenants calling about broken things, no long-term debt sitting on your balance sheet, etc. You put money in, you get more money out, and you move on to the next one. For a lot of people, especially early on, that cycle of earning and deploying capital is exactly what they need to build up their war chest. But here's what people don't always think about with flipping. Every dollar you make on a flip is taxable as ordinary income if you've held the property for less than a year. So if you make $50,000 on a flip, depending on your tax bracket, you might be writing a check to the IRS for $15,000 to $20,000 of that, maybe more. That's the real cost that doesn't show up in the excitement of the sale. And on top of that, flipping is active income. It requires your time, your attention, and your energy on every single deal. You're not building passive income, it's earned income. The moment you stop flipping, the income stops as well. Now let's talk about holding and renting on the other hand. When you buy a property and rent it out, you're playing a completely different game. You're not chasing a one-time payday, rather you're building a long-term asset that produces income month after month. Over time, the mortgage gets paid down, the property hopefully appreciates, and you've got an asset that's working for you whether you're actively doing anything or not. That's the real compounding effect of real estate, and it's why the wealthiest real estate investors I know are holders, not flippers. Rental income also comes with tax advantages that flipping doesn't. You can depreciate the property, which means you can offset a significant portion of your rental income on paper, even if the property is cash flowing positively. There are strategies around cost segregation, for example, 1031 exchanges when you eventually sell, and other tools that make holding real estate extremely tax efficient compared to flipping. That's a whole separate conversation, but the point is the tax environment for long-term holders is fundamentally different and generally much more favorable. So what's the downside of renting? There's a few things. First, your capital is tied up. It's illiquid. When you flip, you recycle that money into the next deal. When you hold, that equity is sitting in the property and you can't easily get to it without refinancing or selling. Second, you're a landlord now, or you're paying someone to be one for you. Management. There are ongoing responsibilities, unexpected expenses, and the property needs to be managed properly. And third, the return does not always show up immediately. A flip might make you $50,000 in 6 months. A rental might cash flow $500 a month. The long game pays off, but it definitely requires patience. Here's the framework I use when I'm looking at a deal and trying to decide which direction to go. The first question I ask is, what does my cash position look like right now? If I need liquidity, if I'm looking to build up capital to go after bigger deals, flipping might make more sense in the short term. It's faster. If I've got enough dry powder to weather some storms and I'm focused on building long-term wealth, holding is almost always the better answer. The second question is, what does the specific deal look like as a rental? First, I run the numbers. What's the rent going to be? What are the expenses? What does the cash on cash return look like? If the deal pencils well as a rental, that's a serious argument for holding. If the margins are thin on the other hand, and it's mostly an appreciation play, I think harder about whether a flip makes more sense. The third question, and this one matters more than people really realize, is what's the condition of the property and what's the scope of work? Properties that need a heavy renovation are often better flips because you're putting in a lot of capital and effort up front, and the value add is baked into that work. Properties that are already in decent shape or just need light updates are often better holds because you're not spending a ton to force equity and the property can start generating income without a massive renovation project first. So here's my honest take. I think the flip versus rent debate is a little bit of a false choice for people who are serious about building wealth through real estate. The best long-term strategy is usually to do both. Flip when you need to build capital or when the deal makes sense as a flip, and hold when the fundamentals support it and you're focused on long-term portfolio growth. They're not mutually exclusive by any means. A lot of successful investors flip in the early years to build a foundation, then use that capital to buy and hold assets that generate income for decades. But if I had to give you one default answer, if someone handed me a solid deal today and said pick one, I'd hold it. I'd hold it personally because the long-term game in real estate almost always wins. Appreciation, debt paydown, cash flow, tax advantages, etc. The math compounds in a way that a one-time flip check just can't match over 10 or 20-year horizon. The flip feels better in the short term, the hold wins in the long term. So the next time you're looking at a deal, don't just ask yourself what you can make on it today, ask yourself what it's worth to own it for the next decade. You're gonna be married to the deal. Run both sets of numbers. Make the decision with a clear head and a clear picture of where you're trying to go. That's how you build something real. Drop a comment and let me know, are you flipping right now, holding, or trying to do both and doing a combination? I'd love to hear where you are personally. Subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of content, and I'll catch you in the next one.